Hello everyone, my name is Kieran Muller and this is Fast Course World History, where we do everything so fast, our production quality is so low, except our content. Today we'll be talking about a subject matter I believe should be near and dear to the hearts of all Americans, Mexico. Particularly about how the relations between the United States and Mexico between the period of time of 1914 to 1918.
Mr. Muller, why should we care about Mexican-American relations? In a few years, Trump is just going to build a wall between us anyway, so there won't be any Mexican-American relations.
No. Trump is not going to build a wall between the United States and Mexico. He's not even going to be the president of the United States, I hope. But you should care about U.S.-Mexican relations because you guys have a long history together. Mexico is one of the United States' biggest trading partners, as well as the United States has quite a sizable population of Mexicans and Mexican Americans. Today, 11.9%, or approximately 11.9% of the United States' total population is made up of Mexicans, where they mostly reside in southern West America. This is a consequence of the United States and Mexico bordering each other, as well as its relationship. Today, relations between the United States and Mexico is generally good. However, if we look to the past, things weren't always so nicey-nicey with each other, especially if we look into the Mexican Revolution. As you all know, the years between 1914 to 1918 was when World War I was taking place. During most of the war, the United States was not fighting in it until 1917. It was during this time that U.S.-Mexican relations were fluctuating, as the Mexican Revolution was taking place at the same time, having started in 1910. The United States' first real involvement in Mexico was in 1914 when it occupied Veracruz, due to the arrest of U.S. personnel in Tampico. But before we dive into the nitty-gritty parts of the Mexican Revolution, I'd like to raise a question. What justified America's actions in Mexico? While the United States didn't always send in the cavalry, there were still periods when it was clearly interfering with Mexican affairs for its own interests. That's like being a bully at school who takes little Tim's lunch money. The beginning parts of the Mexican Revolution were quite political, so let's focus on the presidential elections of 1911. Porfirio Diaz. Porfirio Diaz? For what?
Porfirio Diaz.
Yeah, so that pronunciation. So he was the previous president, who was greatly despised as a leader and still defined as a revolutionary villain. Thankfully, he was overthrown by Francisco Madero, a leader who promised social justice and political reform by installing a liberal government. But not so fast. Madero's revolution began to consume the man himself, as he was unable to fulfill promises of equal land distribution and social reform. Thus, chaos ensued in Mexico, which resulted in Madero turning to a military official called Victor Huerta for assistance. However, Huerta instead joined the rebellion and utilized force to remove Madero from power, which resulted in the failed revolutionaries' murder. First, the Carrancistas, who supported Venustiano Carranza. Our buddy Carranza was from a rich northern family and was very conservative. His government received recognition of its legitimacy from the United States, and Carranza quickly defined himself as the dominating leader. With the United States' support, he was able to attain arms and control the various ports of Veracruz. Carranza was certainly the most influential revolutionary leader at the time compared to his opponents. One opponent was Victoriano Huerta, who led the self-named Huertistas, a revolutionary force that helped overthrow Francisco Madero and his government in early 1913. Although he initially seemed to be a powerful leader who would return peace to the region, Huerta was eventually denounced as a legitimate government by the United States, which threatened to use less peaceful methods to remove him from presidency. President Woodrow Wilson eventually followed through with this threat, sending naval forces to Tampico and forcing Huerta to step down. Two other revolutionaries, Pancho Villa from the north and Emiliano Zapata from the south, were allied together against Carranza. Villa was quite a threat, as historian Friedrich Katz notes how he rallied peasants, soldiers, and military veterans to fight for him, granting him a nobly powerful revolutionary army. Zapata, on the other hand, was only recognized as a peasant leader of communities who grew sugarcane. While these two certainly led a powerful revolutionary army, they eventually split when they reached disagreements on how to eliminate Carranza, their hated enemy. Thanks for the artwork. Anyway, let's keep in mind, these were only the major factions. There were plenty of smaller revolutionary forces in the mix too. With so many factions with different interests, there was bound to be intense military and political conflict for the rule of Mexico. Anyway, the United States didn't exactly have a holistic view of Mexico at the time. Although it certainly supported or despised particular revolutionary forces, Carranza was their favorite for them, given his conservative nature. On the other hand, Villa's disruption caused the United States to send a 9-month military expedition deep into Mexican territory to hunt him down after he attacked the American town of Columbus. And then we have Huerta, who was constantly threatened by the United States as an illegitimate government, where they eventually sent a military force to topple him down, and he was eventually ousted. In the aftermath of Huerta's topple, Carranza seized power, where he became president of Mexico in February of 1917, which his presidency was marked by economic stability, most of which had been caused by the development of many industries throughout the revolution, one being the oil industry. But American-Mexican relations became strained once again, as the Zimmermann telegram surfaced. The Zimmermann telegram was an offer from Germany for Mexico to join World War I against the United States, while offering the reclamation of its lost territories such as Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Although Carranza opted for neutrality, hostility between the two nations was clearly defined at this point, as America was outraged at Germany's offer and decided to join World War I. Of course, America did overreact a bit by publicly announcing the event in order to promote hostility against Germany, resulting in them joining the war. Unfortunately for Mexico, they received quite a bit of pressure during this time. While Carranza's presidency saw much approval from the people, people like Alvaro Obregón did not approve of him, where he planned to overthrow him, leading to more revolution in the country. Assisted by Plutarco Elias Calles, who would be president down the road, and Adolfo de la Huerta, a fellow politician, Obregón denounced Carranza and demanded him to step down. Carranza had declared Ignacio Bonilla, a civilian politician, as his successor, something that did not sit well with the more military-oriented leaders such as Obregón. This resulted in Obregón executing his plan to oust Carranza, where Carranza attempted to flee, where he was able to reach Veracruz before he was captured and executed by followers of Obregón. Is it mystery document time? Alright. Mystery document time. So in this time, all I do is just guess this mystery document that I will be pulling out from this drawer, and I'll have to guess who it is. Alright. For many years, profound disconnect has been felt throughout the Republic due to such a system of government, but General Diaz, with great cunning and perseverance, has succeeded in annihilating all independent elements, so that it was not possible to organize any sort of movement to take from him the power of which he made such bad use. The evil consistently became worse, and the decided eagerness of General Diaz to impose a successor upon the nations in the person of Mr. Ramon Corral carried that evil to its limits and caused many of us Mexicans, although lacking recognized political standing, since it had been impossible to acquire it during the 36 years of dictatorship, to throw ourselves into the struggle to recover the sovereignty of the people and their rights on purely democratic grounds. So, this document is most likely before 1914. It's part of the early parts of the Mexican Revolution. If I were to guess who said this speech, I would say Victoriano Huerta? Oh, God. So this was actually Francisco Madero in his speech against Diaz and his declaration to wage war against him, and helping to kickstart the Mexican Revolution. But unlike the ousting a decade earlier, Obregón's actions greatly helped stabilize Mexico and strengthen ties with the United States. In fact, when Obregón began wiping out remaining revolutionary opponents, he was aided by U.S. weaponry and bombers. The Bucareli treatment also highlighted how American-Mexican relations were improving under Obregón's presidency, as Mexico compensated for damages caused during the war and allowed American contractors to extract Mexico's oil. The Bucareli Treaty, which was signed on 1923, was the treaty between the United States and Mexico. The whole point of the treaty was to compensate for the losses of U.S. citizens during the Mexican Revolution, as there was quite a lot of damage in Mexico and to U.S.-owned property in Mexico. But these reparations were broken down during the presidency of Obregón's successor, Plutarco Elias Calles. Although he initially attempted to make changes benefiting the people of Mexico, he soon began oppressing Catholics, which deteriorated American-Mexican relations. In 1926, he first repudiated the Bucareli Treaty and proceeded to implement anti-Catholic articles in the Mexican Constitution. His actions resulted in the disastrous Cristero War. So while the Cristero War did result in thousands of casualties, it wasn't exactly like a civil war. Instead, it can be defined as a widespread religious conflict where it was the Catholics against the secular, anti-Catholic, and anti-clerical regime of Calles. Furthermore, Calles implemented a series of laws in 1926 that threatened U.S. and European-owned oil fields on Mexican soil, which enraged the American government. In fact, America's ambassador to Mexico titled Calles as a communist, and the Secretary of State issued a threat to Mexico. Things were particularly nasty during this time, and rumors of war were even circulating in the pages of the New York Times. But thanks to some diplomatic maneuvers by Mexico and the establishment of a direct telephone line between Calles and the U.S. President at the time, Calvin Coolidge, tensions simmered down. Also, the quick-mouthed ambassador who labeled Calles as a communist was replaced with Dwight Morrow, who was actually able to convince Calles' government to change their minds, which won more favor in the United States, resolving both the anti-Catholic issues of the Cristero War and the problems regarding petroleum ownership in Mexico. Yet, the regime of Calles continued to become more of a dictatorship, and also at the same time, Obregón began to work with Calles, where he was able to begin grabbing power alongside him. They eventually utilized brute force in order to guarantee Obregón's victory when he ran for presidency once more in 1928. And although Obregón was murdered, Calles defined the next years of Mexico's history, the Maximoto as the most perplexing of all. Throughout these 6 years, Mexico was officially governed by Pascual Ortiz Rubio, but unofficially, it was actually under the complete control of Calles, who wielded considerable political power. Historians such as Burton Crookhorn have defined Calles' regime as a true dictatorship, and he isn't completely wrong. After all, Calles eliminated all who opposed his actions and even forced Rubio from his official seat of presidency. It's kind of ironic when looking back, as the United States initially helped out Obregón, who indirectly led to the creation of a dictatorship in Mexico. Issues regarding petroleum flared up once again in 1938 during the presidency of Lázaro Cárdenas del Rio, resulting in a court case involving the company Standard Oil. Fortunately, President Roosevelt's implementation of the Good Neighbor policy prevented America from utilizing military intervention like it had so many times before. The Good Neighbor policy certainly helped in the near future when World War II was ignited in 1939, allowing America and Mexico to maintain good relations. America benefited from this through its purchase of many precious metals from Mexico, where they used it for industrial and military use. But more importantly, stable American-Mexican relations led to the creation of the Bracero program, through which numerous Mexican agricultural workers were brought to the United States for contract work such as farming. The Bracero program significantly helped America during World War II, by providing its economy a large labor force, even when sending most of its citizens to fight, and also allowed the two countries to improve their already strong relations. Mexico and America haven't always been the best of buddies, as can be seen by their hostility at each other during the Mexican Revolution, that caused them to fling death threats at each other. And times marked with stability have been broken down rather quickly. The two's history with each other have been long and storied, and not altogether peaceful, but conflicts that have arisen have been resolved peacefully in the end. And things have been looking better recently, as the U.S. and Mexico's relationship have been stable, and has not had any significant fluctuations in the past few years. But for now, the 10.9% of Mexicans living in the United States are living rather peacefully with Americans, no matter what Donald Trump says. This is Fast Course World History, talking about Mexico. I'm Kieran Muller, and thanks.